So first of all, welcome to Andy Scott over there in Durham, England. It's really good to see you. And Andy is not only head voicer at Harrison and Harrison, but he is one of the directors of the company and has been working there for a long time, Andy. I'm not sure how many years it is, but I know it's
27 years this year.
27 years. So he started as a wee stripling and has risen through the ranks and therefore knows the company and the art of voicing better than anyone else probably in the world. Andy, I'm talking you up. Don't let me down. We're really excited about having this tour, and we're very, very grateful to you for spending the time with us this morning. We have with us here, obviously, Philip and Johnny, who have been closely involved with the project. We have the chair of our organ committee, George Belshaw, Charlotte Gage, who is our music administrator, and then we have Ginny Lacito, who is the chair of our worship committee, and Susan Kelly, who works in our development office, has raised lots of money for the project. Lucy, who is our senior warden. We have our architect, Josh. Elizabeth Fitz, who is on the organ committee. Lynn Smith, organ committee. Cheryl McFadden, associate rector. Shansia Jarrett, curate. Marek Zabriskie, rector. Abby Vanderbrug, who is associate for children and family. And Neil Booknight, who is our in-house go-to person for questions about architecture and sound. I think I've covered everyone. Andy, over to you. We're really excited.
Welcome everyone to Durham. As you can see, it's a bit of a grey, miserable day here, but having you all here is fantastic. I thought I'd come outside so you can see the workshop from coming in the front door, as you would have done if you've been here in real life. So I'm going to turn my camera around now and chat away as we go to the workshop. So if we just pan around here, this is the front of our workshop. We moved here in 1996 from our workshop in Hawthorne Terrace in Durham, which was in an old converted sawmill. So this workshop was purpose-built for what we do today, although we outgrew it about 3 years ago, which I'll come on to a little bit later when we get into the extension. So if you were coming on a bus tour here, not that we get many bus tours, but this is what you'd see if you come through the front door. We've got our cleaner in today, so I'm just going to see if I can squeeze past her. Thank you very much. I'm just doing a tour of the works. You couldn't just turn that off. So I'll only be 2 minutes in here. So when you enter our workshop, you come into the foyer area here, and we have a couple of model organs on display. And the various people who work here on the management team are all displayed on this board. As you can see, there's not many in today. Most of them are out. And from here, we'll go straight into the drawing office. And if you'll just give me 2 minutes to put my mask on, because we all COVID safe here around the workshop, as you'll see. So we're first off heading into the drawing office where everything happens. And here in the drawing office, we've got two of our designers hard at work. We've got Andy here on the left and David, who's just starting out in the drawing office, doing some design work. And if we look at what Andy's up to on the screen, this is indeed Greenwich on the screen. And what we're looking at here, he's got the elevation of the west, what we call liturgical west. It's not quite west for you lot over in the States, but we referring to liturgical compass point. So that's the west wall. He's busy designing the Chamard Trompette Royale and the wind system for that on the screen. And on the other side, David's busy working on, I think, Liverpool Met. Is that right, David?
I'm doing the layout for Greenwich's solid state at the moment.
So they're both working on your organ at the moment. We're all very hard at work here on Greenwich. Of course, the way the organ starts out is with a specification of stops. And then from that, I designed what's called the pipe scales. And then the drawing office have to then fit those pipe scales into the organ. Sometimes they say they need to be bigger or smaller, depending on space, or at worst case scenario, they say, can we get rid of these stops, which organists don't like. But coming out here into the building room, we have the first glimpse of your organ. So if I just go and stand in the center here, if you imagine yourselves standing in the transept, facing the altar, but in the transept on what we call liturgical north, I'm looking liturgical east at the moment. So the big casework will go all the way up to the ceiling there. And this will be all paneled out down here with nice paneling. And below that are your blowers waiting to be installed in these boxes in the various places around the workshop. We've got lots of different organs in at the moment. We've got what's called Bristol Colston Hall, now known as the Bristol Beacon. We've also got Liverpool Metropolitan Cathedral, affectionately known as Paddy's Wigwam. And we've also got your organ here. So this is standing, looking liturgical south at the moment, so towards what would be the organ console. And you can see they're just starting to rack in those lovely shiny pipes there, which is the pedal ophicleide, which will make a rather grand noise. I might climb up the ladder in a bit once we've been right round the workshop. And then down here on the floor, the other notes of the ophicleide waiting to be racked in. Nice shiny pipes. They haven't been voiced yet either, but they're all there, nicely made. On the left here, we've got lots of pipes from Liverpool Cathedral, and each organ has lots of trays with the smaller pipes in, and they're all labelled up appropriately for all the different stops. The first stop we'll make going this way is the voicing, one of our voicing rooms. This is where my colleague Andrew Fidders works. He'll be coming with me to Greenwich when we get the organ in, and he's been working on the choir Cremona. Of course, when the pipes are made, they don't make a noise at all until they come into the voicing room. And I don't know how many of you twanged your ruler off the side of your desk at school and made it vibrate. Well, the way these pipes work is by a vibrating brass tongue inside, rather like how you twanged your ruler off the side of your table. And I can actually play this. So what we have in the voicing room is a voicing machine, which is like a miniature organ. And I can go down here to this keyboard and I can actually make a noise. And that's the choir Cremona on the voicing machine there. And every single stop on the organ has to be voiced and will be made playable in here. Other things in this room are some pipes for a little church in Scotland that are being worked on at the moment. And then if we turn around to the other side, my shaky camera work, there's some wooden pipes we can see in the background there, and these are for your organ, and this being the swell Lieblich Gedakt, and this one being the solo harmonic flute. Rather nice, all waiting to be voiced, but they're all nicely made, ready to go. We also have a chart on the wall which kind of shows the status of where things are at any time, whether it's been made, whether it's been voiced, whether it's been racked in. So over here we've got Jeff Pollard, who's been with us for many years, and Jeff is what generation, Jeff? They can hear you, but you can't hear them.
Fourth generation organ builder.
Yeah, so Jeff's been working here for how many years now? About half of them.
Yeah.
And Jeff's in charge of the Colston Hall organ, or what's called the Bristol Beacon. So he's restoring old soundboards at the moment. We have two halves to the workshop. We have the old part of the workshop where we're in at the moment, which is humidified. So most of the restoration work happens in this area. because the space is kept at a constant humidity. The new part of the workshop isn't, and we do mostly new work in there because we're using man-made materials which are less susceptible to climatic change, allowing us to work in there freely. We turn left here into one of our pipe stores, and we've got the organ that we've just built for Alexandria in Virginia, waiting to go out. COVID's put pay to sending that out at the moment. That was supposed to be installed and finished for Christmas. At the moment, we still don't know when we can send that out. But if we go to this side, we start seeing things with Greenwich on, Great Octave, and each bay's got a name and the status of what it is. And if we look there, we've got some nice shiny new pipes. All of your pipes are nice, shiny and new, of course, because everything's new. Up here we have the 12 island diapason waiting to be voiced, and also the solo open diapason waiting to be voiced. In these bays here, we've got Liverpool pipes. You can see just how dirty things are. If I come in here, and you can see all that dirt waiting to be washed. And these pieces of metal you can see on the floor there, they're just sheets of zinc. That will eventually be your 32-foot pedal reed. Eventually, I say, because all pipes start their life as a flat piece of metal and have to be lovingly crafted to make an organ pipe. Of course, we're like a well-oiled machine here in Durham. We all play our own part in building the organ. So the metal shop make the pipes, the bench hands make all the components, and we voice them. And we all have a part to play in every single organ that comes through here. So turning from the pipe stores, we have one voicing room at one end and another voicing room at the other end with two pipe stores, but sandwiched in the middle is one of the most important parts of the workshop. And that is the metal shop. And it's a huge hive of activity here in the metal shop. We've got Nigel, who's our metal shop foreman.
Hello there.
He's busy working away on your double clarinet, which Jamie and Johnny saw the other day. It's come on an awful long way since you last saw it. It's now got lids on it. And Nigel's making the slides, which will cover over the regulating slots, which I'll cut in when it comes on the voicing machine. And Nigel, once he finishes this, I think he's going to turn his hand to your 32-foot reed.
I could be persuaded, yes.
Yeah, and we were trying to tot up the other week. We think this is Nigel's 10, or
roundabout, almost double numbers. I think it's maybe number 10,
yeah, 10 32-foot reed. And to give you an idea of how long it'll be when it's cut out on the bench, we had this long bench made a little while ago, and we have an extension that goes on this end and an extension on the other end into the casting room, and the pipes will be cut out in the flat on that bench in several pieces, but the full length. You can just get in here, can't you, Nige? And again, those sheets of metal I showed you out in the pipe stores, that's what the 32-foot will be made from. In the middle here, these are the top notes of the clarinet. And you can see that there's like an orange color on them. And that's like a special size we put on the pipes so that when we're soldering, the solder doesn't run. And that we wash that off with hot soapy water. And then the pipes all get polished to make them all nice and shiny. Over here, we've got Jim Reeves, who recently did all the work at York Minster, and since he's been back from York, he's been working here in the metal shop. And the first pipes he's ever made, having been an organ builder on the bench for many years here, the first pipes he made were actually for your organ, and they're actually on my voicing machine at the moment, so we'll see them a bit later. But this is what you're making here, Jim?
The sockets for Nigel's dual clarinet.
So at the bottom of the pipe, there's a bit goes over to cover the reed, and that's what Jim's making at the moment. And his next stop will be the
16-foot trombone.
16-foot trombone. So a stop that'll get used very regularly. Over here on the left is Adam, and Adam's just been with us. How long now, Adam?
Just over 2 months.
2 months. And Adam is our metal shop apprentice, and he's making sockets for your organ as well at the moment. And then on this end, we've got our other pipe maker, Roger, who is presently making the pedal 16-foot open diapason bottom octave. So this is just the foot of one pipe that he's working on, but the remainder of them that he's been turning up are over here. So they're upside down at the moment. These are the feet, the tapered part stands at the bottom. I should have pointed out all of these different rods and things on the wall. These are length rods, which give the pipe makers the various lengths. And then above the door here, we've got different scales, which give the circumferences of the pipes in the flat. When we're making a set of pipes, the voicer can say it's a such and such, and the metal shop know exactly which one of these to pair up to be able to make the different kinds of pipes. At the other end of the metal shop, we have another pipe stores, and in here there's a lot of your pipe work stored ready to go. We have the pedal principle in this bay, and pedal mixtures, and lots of other things such as the Lieblich Celeste for the swell. You see those pipes are all red. They'll get polished up and washed off, and they'll be nice and shiny underneath there. Here's a stack of pipe trays for your organ, all of which being voiced at the moment. The top one there, the number one diapason having been voiced, and that's all ready to go to America. Actually, it's all been wrapped in and all voiced now, so that's one of the stops ready to go. We come into my voicing room now at the other end, and this is where we predominantly do reed voicing. Just going to park you there looking at that for a second. And the reed voicing we talked about a little bit earlier, which shows with a beating tongue in there, the other pipes in the organ, the majority of them are what we call flue pipes. And they make a sound just like you and I would play a recorder at school. On my voicing machine here, we've got the pedal, pazon and clarion unit. And I can give you a little bit of a tootle on that if I go around the other side. And I don't think Jamie or Johnny will be able to play it quite like that when they get into the church, because they'll be playing it with their feet. So it'll never get played like that again.
Don't you be too certain about that, Andy.
I'll challenge you. So we're going to head out of the voicing room in a moment, but we're going to just look over here to all of these what we call shallots. I don't know what you in the US call the things that you cook with, like little onions, shallots perhaps, but we call these shallots, and these are the special things that the tongues vibrate on, and these get fitted into the blocks rather like this. And then there's a tiny little wooden peg made which holds the tongue in place, which sits on top of there. It's a bit like your gramophone record horn, these tubes on the top. And these are the first pipes that Jim made in the metal shop. Never made pipes before, went in the metal shop in October, and he'd made these by Christmas. So he's doing very well. Back out in the workshop, we've got lots of pipes in for Bristol Beacon. These are all old pipes. You can see how these are like a dark grey colour. What happens is as we get old, our hair goes grey. And it's the same with pipes. Oxidization takes over and they go grey eventually. So all your pipes will go grey gracefully as they age. But underneath this bench here, there's an awful lot of nice shiny pipes. I'll see if I can pull one out. And these are your mixtures, all on different boards. So pedal mixture. This is the pedal mixture, the second rank. And everything's laid on boards ready for the people to rack them into the holes and for us to voice them. And then the way a mixture works in an organ, rather like a choir will sing different notes creating harmony, a chord. Mixtures in organs, when you play one note, you might get 2 pipes playing, you might get 3, you might get 4. I think the biggest mixture you have at Greenwich is a 4-rank mixture. So when you play one note, you get 4 pipes all sounding at the same time. This is more work going on for Bristol Beacon over here. And this is the leather department. And Ian's busy making these tiny little mortars, we call these. And they're part of the action. And the white piece is leather with a wooden board top and bottom. And eventually these will be folded and they're like little tiny miniature bellows, all hand done. So you can see these ones have been closed up. But these few over here, the tails haven't been closed yet. And these ones here, half of the tail's being closed. And there's a process that needs to be followed on all of them. And what Ian's doing here is just skiving the ends of the leather down so that there's a nice flat surface when it's glued and it doesn't create a tight bend in the leather and allows it to move nice and supplely. He has an iron just over there for ironing the leather. We use, oh dear, I have to do it again. And I don't know if he does his ironing at home, but we use the iron here to iron the leather because we use hot glue, hot animal glue, very traditional in the way we apply the leather. You can see it bubbling away there. Not many organ builders have their own spray shop. And here we have a spray shop. And when I started here, each organ builder would polish their own wood, their own work with by brush, and the finish was very like a chessboard inside. But now we have a real consistent finish in everything we do here in the workshop. This is Ian, who's been with us for how long now, Ian?
36 years now.
36 years, and he's busy working on Bristol Beacon, I think this is.
Right.
So he's busy stripping off the old leather, which is now quite perished. And once he's stripped the leather off, he ends up with these blanks here, which is just the mortar boards. And then he'll eventually put all new leather all around. So what you've probably got an idea of now is, thanks Ian, is organ building is very much manual work, manual labour, which is why it takes quite a long time to build an organ. And it also takes a very long time to build an organ of 84, 85 stops like you're having. So it takes a long time to craft all of that. This is Ches, who's working on some stop actions for Bristol Beacon. And they're what make the stops go on and off. And then we've got father and son team here, John and James Oliver. John's in charge of Liverpool Cathedral, and they're busy on leathering up the reservoirs here for the new wind system there. Jamie and Johnny might get a little bit excited at this next bit, because this is the console for Liverpool Met. which is in here for renovation and upgrade. In this big massive box here is your main blower, all being fitted out. So we're going to have a wander through the machine shop now. And this is where we keep all of our woodworking machinery. And at the very far end is all of the timber store. So every organ starts life as pieces of metal and pieces of wood. And it's all the skill of the different men in here that come together to create an organ. And a few years ago, we outgrew, I've just passed into what used to be outside of the factory. We outgrew the factory because we had Salisbury Cathedral, Canterbury Cathedral, York Minster, and Edinburgh Cathedral all happening simultaneously. And we needed to create more space. So we built this extension onto the workshop ahead of all of that so that we could get on with things. And this is where the majority of your organ has been built. You'll see there's a production line going on in here. On the right there is Michael Clough, who is the team leader for your organ, and he will be bringing the team to America to install it. But all of the soundboards we can see in here, which are what make the pipes play, these soundboards are for the swell organ above the console. So out in the main building room is the main part of the organ on the liturgical north or the left-hand side as you look at the altar, which is the biggest part of the organ. But the swell's a smaller part of the organ. It's still significant structure, but that's being built in here at the moment because we need to take your north side down by the end of the summer to put Liverpool Met up, but this will stand alongside it, so there'll be plenty of room out there. Tom's busy preparing this soundboard for the pins which locate where the pallets go. Michael and your man Harry are busy leathering up the inside of what we call the wells of the soundboard, so that when it's being put together, we leather around the insides just to keep them completely wind tight. And now that we're close to Michael, he can give you a wave. So you'll see Michael in due course when he lands in Greenwich, and Harry, of course, he'll be there too. Harry's one of our apprentices. And again, you'll see the traditional glue pots around the place. So everything you can see in here at the moment, this is all rack boards and upper boards for you. And basically everything in here is your organ. On the side here, we've got some wooden pipes being made. These are your pedal, sub, bass and flute in the various stages of manufacture. So each one of these is an individual pipe, an individual note. And each one of those little wooden blocks there will eventually be the great stop diapason. So that's the mouth area being cut out for the great stop diapason. This is one of our loading bays, or the main loading bay now. This used to be outside the factory, but we added this part on when we extended the workshop. It's a low ceiling in this part of the workshop, as you'll see, but the entire ceiling in here, we think green. We do a lot of recycling here of wood. We have the local farmers come and collect the wood shavings from the shavings extraction units for bedding for their animals. We have the lads take bags of offcuts of wood home for their wood burners and so on. But the entire roof of the new extension has got solar panels on, so we generate our own electricity. Not enough to run the factory, but enough to supplement the factory. And on the weekend when we're not working, it's sold back to the grid. So we try and be as green as possible. This is our original loading bay, which is absolutely rammed full of stuff. Each organ gets allocated a bay. Alexandria is all in there waiting to go out. Up there is you. But there's not a lot up there at the moment because it's all built up on the floor. There's Alexandria all packed up, ready to go in the shipping container. This is how your organ will all get done. It'll be all individually wrapped, like posh IKEA. A little bit more expensive though. And then we come back through the curtain into the building room, and we're now looking at the organ standing at the front of the nave, the altar being in that direction. This is the choir organ cantilevered out here above the choir's head, and then that's the large solo box with its shutters speaking into the transept on the left and into the choir on the right. So we're kind of looking directly at a pillar. So when you get this in the church, you won't be able to see this like this because there'll be a pillar in the way. I'll take you up onto the mezzanine now to let you see just how big the organ is from a bit further away and a bit higher up. Up here on the mezzanine is where all the electrical cabling gets made. So there'll be various cables for your organ, several miles. The cable gets pulled off the reel over there and runs all around the table to the different lengths it needs to be. And the different scales are denoted by these different pins, eventually creating a cable, something like that, which just looks like a jumble of wire, but left swell, sharp side, B60. So the organ builder on the bench will know exactly what that is and where it needs to go. At the far end, you'll see we've got loads and loads and loads of keyboards. It's very sad when there's redundant organs, but we get offered lots of organs and they're very valuable to us for one thing and one thing only, for their ivory, which you can't get today. But we like to have a stock of old keyboards just in case there's a damaged console comes in for restoration. We can hopefully have a match. Of course, you technically can't sell ivory now, so if we do replace a damaged ivory key, it just kind of happens in the project, but it's illegal to sell it. You'll see this rather splendid spiral staircase, which came from the old workshop in Hawthorne Terrace. It's a bit of a relic from there. It was the staircase between the lower and upper offices, which serves a dual purpose here. It's a relic from the past, a bit of history from the old factory to here, but it also serves as the second staircase out from all the upstairs offices in case of a fire. And then we can look over to your organ again there. So you can kind of see the scale of it from here. It's an absolutely huge structure. So the soundboards on the right there are the pedal and grate, and underneath are the wind reservoirs of the wind system. If COVID permitted, we'd probably have a dinner party inside the solo box. It's that big. So that's basically the tour of the workshop. I'm mindful of time for you all because I'm sure you've all got to go to work. But I'm going to head back to the voicing room, and I can take any questions. And maybe if you have time, I can demonstrate curving a reed tongue for you. So does anyone have any questions?
Andy, I thought I'd kick off a few questions just by asking about the installation and voicing process. Can you just tell us a little bit about how long it takes and how the organ arrives, and then how long the voicing process and what that includes?
Okay, so at this point in time, Michael's working on a 10-week installation, was what he was talking to me about yesterday. So they'll come out and they'll be with you for 10 weeks in the church, and they'll work what probably appear to you to be really long days. They'll work a 12-hour day, stopping to have a Sunday off probably, and get the organ in. So when the organ arrives, it'll arrive in several shipping containers, and they're staged to arrive at different times. So that you're not inundated with organ. And we often ask for a bit of local help, perhaps unloading the containers, but we're sending out a big team to install your organ, because it's technically 4 installations if you include all the blowing chamber stuff. So there's a big team of 6 of them coming, I believe. And then for the first 2 weeks, the organ, what happens when an organ arrives, everything appears to happen very quickly, and all of a sudden the structure's up, the soundboards are in, the wind system is in, and you think, gosh, this is really quick. But then all of a sudden everything slows down, because once the main structure's up, there's then all the putting the wind trunks in, putting all the wiring in, and then all the things like scribing the casework round the walls and things like that. And all the passage boards in the organ are full passage boards at the moment, but they've got to be scribed around the pillars. So everything happens very quickly in the first 2 weeks, and then it slows down until they make a bit more progress. And then eventually the pipes will arrive last, and they'll be placed in the halls ready for us to come out and voice it. When we come to voice it, I'm reckoning it will be something like 8 or 9 weeks, possibly more. If you look at the contract, it does give an end date, but what we've got to remember and not lose sight of is what we're building here. It's not a car coming out from a car factory which you've chosen it to be red and have leather seats, but it's essentially the same car. Everything we make is bespoke for whatever it is, and at the end of the day, it's an artistic musical instrument we're making. So the voicing takes as long as it takes, but we obviously have to have an end game in mind for that. And voicing's all done by ear, and we'll need it quiet in the church. And we've just come back from York Minster, having done the voicing there, and Philip, who's online today. We've had an absolutely unique, never to be repeated thing because of COVID. We've had York Minster literally to ourselves for 2 months. Absolute silence and just us working in the building. It's been fantastic. We'll never get that again, but in Greenwich, it'll be really important when we're voicing that your cleaners aren't around with the hoovers, that can come in and do the cleaning when we finished, or hoover on the morning first thing. But we need it quiet to be able to produce the best possible result musically. And then over the weeks of voicing, we might start letting the organists have a bit of a play. So it's a long process, and it'll be very exciting when we get there.
How many people are involved in the voicing, Andy?
In Durham, we have me as head voicer. I have my associate voicer, Andrew Fidders, who's out on a project in Morpeth at the moment. And we have our trainee voicer, Daniel. So there's 3 of us full-time in the voicing department here. We also have 2 other voicers out on the shop floor who occasionally do bits of voicing on restoration projects where there's no musical decisions to be made. And whenever there's musical decisions to be made, it'll always be the core full-time voicing team. And in England, we're the largest firm of organ builders, but we're also the only firm of organ builders that has a full-time voicing team. with more than one person voicing every day, which allows us to kind of specialize in different kinds of voicing rather than the smaller firms who are doing the building, the restoring, and the voicing. But all we do, myself, Andrew, and Daniel, we are just voicing all day long, every day. So it's a specialist team, but we're part of the bigger team of H&H.
Thanks.
So any other questions?
Don't be shy.
There's various hands going up.
Go on, Philip.
I was just going to say that you'll find Christ Church Greenwich wonderfully quiet. When I'm there, I'm always amazed at the silence during the day, because obviously, having known York Minster for 25 years with crowds of visitors, I think you'll be very pleased with the conditions there.
Apart from the leaf blowers blowing a sea that was slightly flat yesterday.
It's currently blowing. We'll have to. That is something we'll have to manage.
Yes. Well, at York, we were rather troubled by. I don't know whether there's an RAF Air Force base local to the Minster, but I was trying to find the phone number to ring them up and say, "How very dare you fly your noisy aeroplanes over the top of my Minster?"
They come over us sometimes too.
I have a quick question.
Ginny?
Andy, you mentioned that you had your organ for Alexandria all nicely wrapped up and ready to go, and that it was intended to have arrived before Christmas. And I'm just wondering if you're able to share what the delay might have been that prevented its travel across the pond, only in the hopes that we can plan and maybe prevent such a similar occurrence.
Yeah. The delay is purely because we could have put it in a container and sent it to America, but then we have no idea where that container is going to sit and for how long it's going to sit. And of course, inside the container, we want to negate how long an organ is in shipping, because of, for instance, we always specify when it's going on a shipping container for a space in the hold rather than on top of the hold, because if you're going through hot climates, the sun's beating down on the container, and of course you've got delicate glues and things in there, so we always specify it inside, but we don't like the organs sitting in the containers long. So even if we'd shipped the organ to America, it could have been sitting outside the church in God knows what climate, with rain possibly, hot, cold, snow, freezing. We want the organ to be in the container for the shortest duration of time as possible. So we never load the containers until they're going, and we also never load the container not knowing we can't be at the other end when it gets there.
So this is all sort of the pandemic occurrence that you
basically, yeah.
Okay, hopefully.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I mean, the other thing as well is we've got another project in Lagos which we need to go back and complete, but international travel's just not happening at the moment, of course. And before lockdown, this time last year, I was supposed to be in India, Singapore, and Australia, which all got knocked on the head. So those projects have got to catch up too. So the only reason it hasn't gone to Alexandria, they even asked, could we send it and have somebody local put the organ together? And of course, absolutely not. So we won't send it until we know we can be there to receive it at the other end. And at the moment, until all of our team have had the vaccinations, and you've got it different with the pandemic in America to what we have in England, and the schools have only just gone back this week, and so yeah, that's the only reason it's here. But the church is still closed, so it's not like they're missing. Well, they are missing the organ, but the church is still closed.
Right. Okay, understood. Thank you. Yeah.
Johnny's really
George has a question.
Johnny's very skilled with Lego, so if maybe you could send it overhead. Eddie, this is Merrick Zabriskie. I'm the rector. I just want to say this is so fascinating. I've never seen a tour of an organ shop, and you really run a first-rate, incredible place. We're so fortunate to have you building our organ. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we're enormously grateful, and that you've come to us and entrusted us with building something that's going to be part of your worship for generations. And it's a huge legacy that you've been able to to do this, and you know, we're just humbled to be part of it as well.
There are two questions I see. Josh has a question.
Sure. Why are some pipes wood and some pipes metal?
That's a really good question. Making pipes out of wood takes longer than making pipes out of metal. The majority of pipes in organs are made out of metal. The metal, I've got a piece of metal here. So these pipes behind me, you can see they've got like a spotted finish to it. It's this kind of metal here. It's got like it looks like pattern on it, doesn't it? And that's because lead and tin have two different melting points, and this is an alloy of lead and tin, about 55% tin, 45% lead. And as the two metals cool at the different speeds, they produce this natural finish, and you can see it's very bendy, very easy to manipulate. So cutting the pipes out in the flat and rolling them around what we call mandrels to shape them and form them is quite straightforward. Whereas with timber, we usually only put timber pipes in things like on the pedal stops, which you want the deep notes, and you want nice round notes and warm notes. So there's always less pipes made of wood in an organ because they're more complicated to make. I hope that's answered that one.
George, did you have a question?
Thanks, Jimmy. I just had a quick question. It looks like using poplar. Is that the primary species that you guys use these days?
The stop diapason on the grate will be made of pine, yellow pine. But majority of the wooden pipes, or all of the wooden pipes, are made of poplar. But the big open wood on the pedal, the bottom 12 notes of that will be made of poplar plywood. And we first made some pipes out of plywood, we'll call it, for Canterbury Cathedral. And in the trade, that was really scoffed at, making pipes out of what was deemed an inferior material. But why not? It's man-made, it's in sheet form, and they're very successful. And we've just done some at York as well, which Philip has heard in recent times, the big open wood there, and he can attest that they're very fantastic and pervading notes all the way down, every note the same. So we've got no hesitation in doing it. So most of the wooden pipes are made of poplar. The smaller ones are made of pine because it's an easier material to work with it in a smaller detail. And of course, for the sound as well, I want a wood that's not too thin, or it has to be quite dense to get good notes out of it. So it's poplar and pine, and then the biggest ones are made of plywood.
Any final questions before we let Andy go and build our organ? George has another one.
I have one more.
Go on, George.
It looks like you have. Are you gonna be able to put the whole organ together in your shop at one time, or is it just going to have the two sections? So you have I see you have the grate and the choir. Building that now. How about the? Well, I guess you've been calling it the box over the choir swell over the console. Will that be put up at the time, or all up together at one point?
Yeah, so at the moment we've got the main chamber, the left-hand section looking at the altar, built up in the workshop, which has got the grate, pedal, solo and choir, and the wind system for all of that. And we've put that up because that's occupying the entire floor of the building room. What they'll do is they're doing a process now called fitting up. So the main structure's built, they're busy fitting up all the different components now and putting the big pipes in, because they need to be fitted in with the organ built up so we can see how we're fastening things together and so on. And then the casework will go on the front while it's still built up. But the casework's so tall, we won't be able to put the finials on the top of the case because we'll have to cut a hole in the roof. So what they'll do is they'll put because the lower section of the casework's all paneling, and then the casework's above that. They'll build the case up as high as they can, and then the organ will come down, and they'll then build the casework up from impost level and put the top on. But the reason we're doing things in this order, we couldn't build both sides of the organ on the building floor as it is, because the north side, liturgical north, is taking up the entire floor. But that will come down at kind of late August, so that we can build up Liverpool Met alongside your swell side. I hope that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
So it's kind of economy of space, because the current part of the organ takes up the entire floor.
Yeah. Andy, you mentioned that you might show us something that you was it curving a reed or?
Yes, if you've all got time, I'll do my best to demonstrate that for you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Fantastic. Well, see if I can get this camera technology to over to my block there. Can you see that curving block there?
Yeah.
I'll just put my gloves on. One of the things about voicing, especially when you're using brass and nice shiny pipes, is the oil in our skin. We don't want that on the brass or on the pipes after they've been polished. I'm just going to put my camera on so I can see what I'm showing you. So what we've got is we've got a little brass tongue here, which needs to be curved. And this brass tongue gets fitted into here, and it vibrates up and down in here. But it has to be curved in a very special way. And we do that on this burnishing block. And what I do first off is I go over the back side of the tongue and just take off the what we call the burr, if you like. And if you see this block's got a profile on, there's a slow taper there and a quick taper there. And as a voicer, my job is to get these curved correctly. And I kind of instinctively know where to position the tongue on the block for the tongue of this size. And then I push down on the block and start getting, I don't know if you can see that tongue starting to curve. Yep. And the idea with this is you don't want the tongue slapping down on the shallot. You want it rolling up and down on the shallot. And it could take me 10 or 11 goes. You can see that tongue's now got quite a curve on it. And then what I do is I put it in the shallot and I just have a look. And I've put just a little bit too much curve on that. If you put too much curve on a reed, when you play the note, they're slow to respond. If there's too little curve on the tongue, you get these really raspy, hard, edgy notes. And this stop's voiced on 8 inches of wind pressure. I don't know how you measure gas pressure in the States, but in England they used to years ago do it with a manometer, which was a U-shaped tube full of water, and they'd measure the displacement of water. That's how we measure organ pressure, but it's done on a digital gauge these days, but we can still measure it in the old-fashioned style. So I don't know if you can see that tongue there, how it's curving, and I think I'm pretty happy with that now. And the next thing I need to do is fit what we call the load. So the tongue has a weight on the end of it called a load, which helps control. Oh, I've lost my knife. I went and opened that parcel before, didn't I? And because it's on such a high pressure, the tongue needs a bit of control on it. So I'm going to put this tiny little weight on the end of the tongue. Now, bear in mind, all of this is just for one note of one stop, this entire process. So you've got to repeat this by the number of stops. So the first thing I'm going to do is heat this glue stick up. And put some glue on the load. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to heat the tongue, because if you put the glue straight onto a cold tongue, the glue doesn't take. And you use the heat of the tongue to remelt the glue to affix the first part of the load. And then any glue around the edges needs to be taken away. because the bottom of the tongue needs to be completely clear. So now we've got a curved tongue with a felt load on it. But because this is on 8-inch pressure, I need a little bit more weight on there. So I'm going to put on a piece of lead, which has been punched out. So there's the tongue with the felt and the lead on it now. And then the next thing to do is to fit it to the shallot. So obviously it's a loose fit. We put it in, and then this tiny wooden wedge, handmade with a chisel. Our trainee voicer made all of the wedges for me. And then what I'm doing is I'm pulling in that wedge to nip the tongue into place. And then the last thing on the assembly side of things, I need to look down that end of the pipe and make sure that there's no daylight around the shallot. So the wind all goes up past the tongue. And of course, the block, this part of the pipe here we call the block, and that's made of lead, so it's very soft, and I can just scribe around and seal any tiny cracks. So the voice has stopped, like this pedal, trumpet and clarion. It's about 3 days work in total by the time you've cut the tongues out, because each tongue has to be made to a correct thickness, needs to be cut out. The wedges all need to be made. The tongues need to be curved and so on. I think that tongue just needs a little bit more curve on it now since I've put the weight on. I've got this very special tool here, handmade. You can't buy this in B&Q or whatever your hardware store is in the States. And I'm just teasing the tongue between the two prongs just to give it a little bit more curve further back. All of this before it even makes a noise. And then we have the tuning spring, which needs to be fitted. And that fits into the hole, and then that rests on the tongue. What I've got to do now is make sure that the tongue sits the spring sits perpendicular to the tongue, otherwise it won't work. And with reeds, it's really important that you get all the preparation and geometry right, and that promotes good reed speech. I've often thought about putting a webcam up in the voicing room, but this is all like the dark art. That, you know, well, there's a famous organ builder called Schulze, and he famously said, you know, they might have my pipe scales, but they don't have my ears. So the spring's now in there, and what the spring does is it makes the tongue vibrate faster or slower. You know, like your ruler on the end of your desk. So by pushing it down, the tongue would beat faster and slower. Still think I could have a weeny bit more curve on it. Of course, on this sort of scale, they're very small tongues and they can be really tiny. And on a 32-foot reed, it can be quite a big piece of brass that you have to get the perfect curve on. Pretty good. And then now that I'm happy with all of that, I have to put the final bend on the tuning spring. see there now, it's got the, which you can catch with the reed, and I'll put the wind on. And then I can just move the camera elsewhere. Hope you can all see that there. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put the assembly into the socket, and it should make a noise. Sounds like a kazoo. But what you want, this tube here is what we call a resonator. And this is like your gramophone record horn. And this sits on the top and it amplifies what's happening inside the pipe. So. And that's the birth of one note. But you can hear when I play the note, it kind of just blows wind to start with. Now that's because there's just a little bit too much curve on the tongue now, and I would take that out and reduce the curve until I get it right. But that's more or less it in a nutshell for one note. And yeah, obviously you can see there's a small slot in the top of these pipes as well. The length of the pipe I'd already worked out and cut it the length before, so you didn't see that process and cutting the slot in. But so one pipe could take from start to finish about 40 minutes just to make one pipe play.
Andy, that's fantastic. Absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, I've never seen that process end to end. That's
really good. Yeah.
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 I've got one question, Andy. Your job is such a marriage of musicianship and practical skill. How did you first get into it? Because I've known you for over 20 years and I've never asked that.
Well, I was very fortunate, and Philip will probably know this name. I wasn't a cathedral chorister, but I came to being a chorister quite late in life, and the director of music was Russell Mitten, retired from Newcastle Cathedral and took on Tynemouth Parish Church it kind of in his retirement. And I became a chorister of his, and I learned on my father's Hammond organ. So I learned a very different style of organ playing to the classical organ. And I then started taking classical organ lessons around about the age of 11. But when I was 12, believe it or not, I decided I wanted to be an organ builder. And how many 12-year-olds actually know what they want to do these days? It's crazy, really. So before I even did my GCSEs, I'd had an interview at Harrison's and had an apprenticeship lined up. And so I came into organ building alongside playing organs, and was going out tuning organs from about the age of probably 18. And then moved to London, which is when we first met, Johnny, when I was 21, when I became head tuner and responsible for Westminster Abbey and the Royal Festival Hall, and did the London tuning round for 16 years, overlapping with being head voicer for part of that, because at the time we didn't have much work in. So it worked out quite nicely, me still being London tuner and head voicer, because I was out tuning, earning money, when there wasn't much voicing to be done in Durham. But when the voicing became really busy in Durham, I gave up the London round to my colleague Jake, and focused on being head voicer. So keeps me busy. But yes, it's a fantastic marriage, because it's not just a job for me; it's a vocation. And being a church musician as well, it really influences how I do my job. Yeah.
Very interesting. George, are you wanting to ask a final question?
No, I got to go to another meeting. Sorry.
Okay.
10 minutes late. going grow.
I know.
So anyways,
George
Andy,
has
thank you
become
very much.
George has become an organ nerd. He's just totally addicted to it. So,
Excellent. Good.
well, if there
Can I just ask one question?
go on, Philip.
Are we? Oh, yes. The cutting out at the top of the pipe, Andy. What does that actually do?
So on a reed pipe, you alter the length of the pipe by opening and closing the slot.
Yes.
And what that does is opening the slot makes the pipe go a little bit sharp, which
Right.
means you have to then flatten it at the tongue, which
Yes.
makes more of the tongue vibrate, and it creates a harder note, if you like. So the shorter
Yes.
the tongue, so you think of a French horn, how controlled the tone is. The tongue beating length of the tongue's really short, so it's really under control. Whereas things like trumpets, which are more brassy, there's more of the tongue vibrating. So the slot allows you to alter the tone of the pipe ever so slightly within the realms of taste.
Thank you. Thank you. Just wanted to say also, I'm so glad you're doing what I know as the Colston Hall and Liverpool Met. They're two fine
Yes,
organs, totally different.
Totally different, and that's what's fantastic about organ building. The organ building, there's variations on the theme, pipes and wind, but the way that the pipes are put, for me especially, the way the pipes are voiced, they're speaking different musical languages. So, you know, one week you could be working on a real historic restoration, like Hovingham. And then at the moment we're working on a Nigel Church organ in Northumberland in Morpeth, which Nigel Church, he was a very fine organ builder, but not very good voicer. So the pipes were made and they were more or less chucked in the holes. And so we've had to very carefully bring those pipes back to Durham and voice them. If you remember, Philip, one of your questions at York was, you know, what have they done to the pedal 15th, and Robert's response was that they've just voiced the pipes, or was it the quiet 2 foot? There's a way of voicing and a way of making the pipes speak, and they're two very different things.
Yes.
So it's a fantastic thing
Yes.
for certainly for me in the voicing department, being able to work in many different styles and have to research things and be very careful. But for Greenwich, you know, we've got an absolutely clean slate in building a brand new organ, and those opportunities don't come along very often. And the largest brand new organ that Harrison's made, the last one, was Coventry Cathedral. And we've built plenty big organs in our history, and York being the most recent one in Canterbury Cathedral. But they were Canterbury only had 40% of the pipework was new. The remainder was old, being reused in. And at York, we were matching in the missing pieces of the jigsaw, so to speak. But in Greenwich, we've got an absolutely blank slate here. So, you know, this is a landmark project for us here at Harrison's, as well as you over in America.
Yes.
Very exciting.
Andy, I know you've got work to do, and it's been wonderful having you take us through the factory and show us everything. I'd just like to thank everyone for coming and thank you for your time. And just to say in conclusion that it's very exciting and it's a landmark project, but how fortunate I feel that we have someone who is not only has the ears and the pedigree and the experience and the skill, but who sees what they do as a vocation. I think it's really important, and somebody who actually works as a musician in the church. It's so involved in our project, and so I feel extremely fortunate that that's the case, and I'm more excited than you can imagine about the months ahead. So I'm sure we'll be seeing more of you. I know we have something scheduled with our congregation, and that's something that we're looking forward to. And thank everyone else for coming, for being here, spending time with us. I know, Philip, I think we're going to catch up with you in a few minutes, but if there are no further questions, then we'll let Andy go and we'll say goodbye, and we'll see you soon.
See you all soon.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Fantastic.
Yeah, amazing.